Hello and welcome back to another episode of Inside the Asperger Studios. Are you looking for an ADHD therapist that also deals with mindfulness? Well, my next guest is just that. So sit back, relax, and grab your favorite beverage, and let's learn more about her. See you there.
I wanna believe in the truth, but only see what I'm shown. Got the freedom to choose, but can't decide on my own. Follow what the group is thinking, bottle up my intuition till.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Inside the Asperger Studios. Today I'm joined with Liesl. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Loving being here.
So why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself?
Well, I am in Scotland. I am an online therapist and mindfulness teacher, and I work mostly with ADHD people. Um, I suppose the name gives it away that I'm not originally from here. I'm South African originally. Um, but it is pretty useful because I'm the only Liesl Laidlaw in the world. It'd be interesting if your listeners could come up with another one, but I think I'm the only one.
Now, how did you get into being an ADHD and mindfulness therapist?
Well, anyway, it's a long story, but I'm going to try and make it concise for you. I used to work as a contractor in change management in financial services, and
Hmm.
at the time, it felt like it would be really helpful to get some peace in my mind because it was very, very hard to focus.
Hmm.
And the only time I ever got that was at the end of a yoga class. You know that bit where you're lying down on the mat and breathing and just listening to the teacher. That was the best bit of peace I could get in my head the whole week. And it w was when I asked the yoga teacher, how can I get more of that, that they recommended mindfulness. And there was a course about to start locally that I signed up for. And at that time, I went into the mindfulness course thinking, oh man, this is a bunch of hullabaloo. This guy is obviously going to be trying to sell me something. And it was the furthest from the truth because not only was the course offered as a free course from a charity in order to get as many people into mindfulness as possible. The whole point of it was just to get people in touch with their real selves.
Hmm.
So the more I practiced that, the more I recognized it was possible to have a little bit of a slowdown in my mind from time to time. And as time goes on and you learn more about mindfulness and you build more of a practice, it sort of builds the idea that you might ask yourself some questions. And that alongside a book by Johan Hari, in which he says something like, whatever you don't change is what you choose,
Hmm.
made me start questioning a lot about what I was doing. And that's when I started recognizing that what I was doing by working in the city and doing the job I was doing was actually serving an expectation rather than the actual needs that I had and my family had at the time. And that's when I started thinking it's maybe time to start honoring those needs, but I don't know how because the expectations are so strong. You've got to earn a certain amount of money, you've got to have a certain title, um, all that kind of stuff that got in the way of trying to do the thing that really would nourish me. And eventually, I did manage to work out which direction I wanted to go in by literally looking at what I loved, and that was to retrain as a therapist. At the time, I still didn't know I was an ADHDer, though.
Mm.
I've trained as a therapist. I started working as a therapist, and it wasn't until I started recognizing that the clients that I really vibed with the most tended to be the ones that had ADHD. And at the same time, my our child was on the path for diagnosis and eventually got an autism diagnosis. And it was through learning what they needed, what I needed to bring to be helpful to them in their life, that I started recognizing that there was so much that was the same in needs between them and me that I was like, well, there's no way you can go around calling yourself neurotypical now. And the more research I did, the clearer it became. And eventually it was just irrefutable. I am an ADHDer. So that's how I got there.
No, I mean, that's kind of interesting. I mean, a lot of people don't realize they have ADHD, especially
Hmm.
the adults, until
Hmm.
they go to get their child tested, and all of a sudden it's like, oh my God,
Yeah,
You're reading off everything I have and I have experienced, every trait I have, and
yeah,
then they just look at their doctor and go, "Do you think I am what he has as well or she is?" And
yeah,
they're like,
yeah,
"Yeah, you might as well get tested as well."
yeah, absolutely. There's such a pathway. And the problem with ADHD especially is that until 2014, it wasn't possible for an adult to be diagnosed with ADHD. It was assumed it was a childhood thing that you grew out of, and it
Mhm.
was specifically associated with boys. So if you happen to be female, well, you just didn't luck out there. Um, so there's an awful lot of people in midlife now and slightly younger than that going around going, oh, well, now I recognize why life was on a hard setting this whole time.
Now, for those listening, what is mindfulness? And would you say that the majority of those who are ADHDers, would you say that they're not very mindful?
I wouldn't like to speak for other people, but let's start with what mindfulness is first. So mindfulness is being in the moment, recognizing what's going on right now without judging it. Intentionally noticing what's going on right now without judging it. Now, that's hard to do when your mind is off in 40 different directions at 100 miles an hour in each direction,
Mhm.
because you're getting involved in thought, you're getting involved in plans, you're getting involved in memories. It's very hard to bring yourself back to what's really genuinely going on right now while all that's going on. And so for ADHDers, it's even harder than for the general population to be mindful because there's so much going on internally and sometimes externally, especially if you're the hyperactive version of ADHD. But
Go on.
there's a, sorry, go for it.
No, go on.
I was just about to say that actually for ADHDers, because we're so observant of novelty, we are so able to spot a thing that isn't the pattern that we're used to, or be able to see something that's brand new.
Mhm.
Actually, mindfulness is something that works out really well for us because it's asking us to have a little look to see what's there. And if it's different from how it was 5 minutes ago, we can notice that because now it's different from how it was 5 minutes ago. So it can keep our attention. If we do it intentionally and we practice, it doesn't come automatically.
Now, would you say because of the fact that we lack dopamine, that we
Hmm.
are always going after the quick fix, would that be the problem with mindfulness is because of the fact that we get bored so fast because we
Yeah.
mastered something, we need to move on to something new.
Yes, that is the challenge. So yes, we've got this great joy of being able to spot things and that brings dopamine and there's a novelty going on. But the flip side of that is also true. Um, once you've done it for 5 minutes, well, that's it, right?
Yeah.
And the concern is that as soon as somebody says, "Oh, you have to do this as a routine and you have to make it a practice," they're like, "Oh, forget it, not doing it. I can't remember to brush my teeth. Never mind, sit down for 20 minutes twice a day." But the joyful thing is you get to do it your own way.
Mhm.
You don't have to do it the same way as someone else does it. You have to don't have to do it the same way as the app does it. You don't have to do it the same way as your teacher does it. What's really important is that we do it in a routine as close to a routine as we can get it. And the next time I remember, do it then. Rather than going, oh, I didn't do it this morning. Black and white thinking means I then don't get to do it tonight because, well, I'll have to start again tomorrow. You get to start where you are in the moment. You don't have to be making major plans. You just need to do it regularly.
I mean, that kind of reminds me of I did a market research a long time back about job
Mm-hmm.
transitions. And I'm
Hmm.
sitting there and they go, okay, we want you to go up on the paper on the wall and write down every job you've ever had.
Okay.
And I'm sitting there and I'm writing down, I only had like 3 jobs at the time, and I'm looking at
Yeah.
everybody else and they got 10 to 15 jobs down. I'm thinking,
Ah.
am I the only person here who is set in the job long enough? And why are these people jumping from job to job? And
Hmm.
it's got to be either they weren't happy in their job or a
Yeah.
majority of them have ADHD and not realize it.
Uh-huh.
And it just blows my mind that how people could jump from job to job and not be happy.
Sure. And here's the thing. ADHDers, you'll find if you look at a CV for an ADHD or a resume, as you call it, um, there will be loads of jobs. A lot of ADHDers do not stick at a job for very long, and it's not necessarily because they're rubbish at it. It could be that they've run out of a challenge.
Yeah.
It could be that they need something new, they need a new challenge to keep them involved in what's going on. Otherwise, they will lose interest and the job will end up, going badly for them. On the other hand, if the conditions of a job are right for an ADHD, or in other words, there's enough novelty in there, it's interesting enough, there's
Mhm.
enough challenge, those kind of things, then someone with ADHD is much more likely to stick to a job like that for 30 years than job hopping as many people do. And we also have to remember that not every ADHDer only has ADHD, right? There's a
True.
big overlap, like maybe about 40% of ADHDers are also autistic. And that really loves a bit of routine, loves a structure.
Mhm.
And so it depends on which side you're benefiting when you're deciding what you're doing with your job. And both sides will have an influence on what's right for you.
I mean, that reminds me, somebody once told me that you can have autism and ADHD, but you can't have ADHD and autism.
Okay, okay, that's interesting.
I mean, basically what they're saying is if you're diagnosed with autism, there's a chance that you have ADHD along with it. But if you're just diagnosed with ADHD, there,
Uh-huh.
there's a not as much of a likely chance that you're autistic as well.
hmm hmm It's it. Look, I'm not going to argue with that statistic. I guess what I would want to say that's really important is when you do get a diagnosis for either of those things, you get a spiky profile of what
Hmm.
the traits are that are prevalent for you. And so if you have enough spiky traits towards autism as well as ADHD, then and they are there's enough of them and strong enough for them to be to reach a clinical limit, then you have both. And whether it's, more of one or less of the other, it doesn't matter. If you've got a clinical number of both um, for an assessment, then you've got both.
Now, what kind of tools do you use to work with your clients? Because I know
Mhm.
everyone's got their own different issues dealing with their ADHD. What tools do you use to help them to like keep focused and be more mindful when,
Uh-huh.
especially when if they're in a job and they want to keep that job? Because
Yeah,
I both know when you have ADHD, your mind doesn't tend to stay focused unless it's something you're passionate about.
sure. So it really depends on the client. And this is, it sounds like a cop out, but actually, it really matters that it depends on the client. Because if I was to go in with here's my ready-made recipe for how to help ADHDers, then that would not be an individual situation. And actually, you could go and buy something off the shelf. Um, then, whereas if I'm asking my client what it is that's kicking their butt this week, and what is it that keeps kicking their butt every week, then we can kind of get to a pattern of where the difficulty is showing up. Then we can try and work out what's driving. So this is for therapy, right? What's driving that difficulty? What from their past makes it harder for them to be in the moment with that difficulty? What are the concerns they have about the future associated with that difficulty? And once we've worked out all those kind of things, we can start putting in strategies that are appropriate for them. And they really know the answer. I'd never go in thinking I know the answer because you are the expert on your own life. There's no point in me telling you what to do. We have to work it out together.
Now, how do you deal with mindfulness
Mm,
when you have a client who's comes in with a chaotic and an overstimulating day? I mean,
mm.
that's got to be tough because when you're overstimulated, you're almost at the end of your wit and you're
Yeah,
just about to melt down. How do you deal
sure.
with
So when I'm teaching mindfulness, I usually do it in a group setting online. So I'll have I'll have a whole virtual room full of people like that when we first start off.
that?
Now, the one thing that I find is really useful doing it online is that people are in their own homes.
Hmm.
They're in a comfortable setting by the time we get together. So even if they've been rushing to try and get there, because time waviness, as I like to call it, will mean that a good percentage of my class will be late. So they might turn up stressed and late and full of fizz as they sit down. But whenever we start a session, the first thing we do is a sort of welcome sit where we get everybody to focus on what they're sitting on. whether sitting is the right thing for them, maybe lying down is better, whether perhaps standing would be better in the moment, focusing on what their body's needing in that very moment. Instead of, oh, you won't believe, so cut me up on the motorway, or somebody pushed in front of me on the subway, or whatever, right? Those things are are sort of addressed by in that welcome sit where we go, right, so whatever's been going on, whatever's brought you here and built the sense of emotion and sensation that's going on for you right now is allowed to be in the past. We
Mm,
are here in this moment and we're giving ourselves a moment to arrive. And so we'll notice physical things like where we are. We'll notice what the breathing's like. And naturally, as we start focusing on those things in a safe environment,
mhm.
we'll start slowing down our thoughts, our breathing, our heart rate until we're genuinely here and we no longer have to be living in that history or the worry.
That's interesting. Now, can mindfulness help support executive dysfunction like procrastination and forgetfulness? Can it kind of like gear people to say, hey, I want to be less procrastination and I don't want to be as forgetful as I normally am?
Absolutely is the short answer, but let's make it a bit more interesting. How about if I asked you for an example in which you struggle with procrastination, if this is
I
appropriate for you?
I tend to struggle a lot with procrastination.
Uh-huh.
In the days of school, I used to like put off studying till the last minute.
Uh-huh.
Even to this day with my shows, I tend to write my questions the day before the show
Yes. Okay.
because I know with ADHD, it's that stimulation of, oh, I got to get it done. And then that
Yeah.
builds up the dopamine because
Yeah.
it's that excitement level and then it
Mhm.
just disappears.
Okay. So this is a pattern that we clearly recognize, right? It's not new. It hasn't just suddenly happened to you. It's always been there since throughout school and studies, right? So the fact that you know that doing it at the last minute works for you tells us that if we mess with that, we might not get as good an outcome as we do when you do it like that. So the question would be, what is it you're trying to achieve? What is it you're trying to change and why?
Hmm.
And if you say to me, well, everyone else says I should be doing it 2 weeks in advance, my question would be, that works for them. Wonderful. How lovely for them. If it doesn't work for you, it's not going to be helpful to you. So what if we said, well, we know that doing it right before the thing is useful for me because I get my drive in that moment. I don't have to make it hard. What are the unintended consequences of you doing it straight before, the day before? What are the things that make it hard when you do that?
Focus
Hmm.
because you gotta come up with questions on the spot just about.
Hmm. Okay.
Time restraints,
Hmm.
distractions.
Okay. So actually, there's a risk to that because let's say something distracts you in the moment or something else happens that takes
Mhm.
up the time and you now have less time, then the unintended consequence of doing it your way is that you end up with either not enough questions or the questions are a bit wishy-washy because you've not been able to spend any time on it. So if I was working with someone in therapy individually, what we would come up with is a solution to that based on what your needs are. So if I was to say to you, right, so tell me about a time when you've set yourself a fake deadline slightly ahead of the actual deadline. What happens when you do that?
You kind of if you set a fake deadline instead of the actual one, your mind focuses on that deadline
Mhm,
instead of the real one, and then
mhm.
you use that as, I guess, your goal to get stuff done by.
Okay. Now, my question to you would be, how do you make that fake deadline matter to you? Because otherwise, what will happen is you'll go, fake deadline, fake deadline. I know it's not real. Goodbye, fake deadline, still late. So what do you do to make that fake deadline matter to you?
You put some importance to it, I guess.
Uh-huh. So why does it matter to you? Why would you want a fake deadline?
So less stress.
Yes. And how
To
does less stress help you?
Well, I believe when you're less stressful, you're more focused. Your
Yes.
mind is not in a frantic
Yeah.
blur of gotta do this, gotta do that, gotta pull this, gotta do that,
Got it.
gotta do
Yeah.
this, gotta research that. You're not in a hurry. Your mind's not like spinning, doing loops.
Yes. And you've got a bit of a scientific point there because when you are stressed, you're in fight or flight mode. And the bit of your brain that's in charge is the amygdala, and that's just for fight or flight. It's the oldest part of our brain, and it's a very black and white thinking version of ourselves. It isn't very good at being creative. It doesn't have capacity for that because it has to just save you or get you away from the problem. So if you put yourself in a stressed situation by actually leaving it to the last minute, yes, you'll get something done. But if you want to be creative as well as slightly pushed, set yourself a fake deadline, make it matter because you don't want to be stressed because you really want to do a good job. The more you give yourself a bit of a push, but not so hard that it brings the amygdala online, you are more likely to be creative and able to do what you do. And then if you have a distraction or a disaster or whatever, well, it was a fake deadline. Thank goodness there's still time before the actual deadline.
Mhm. Now, what are some of the biggest myths of ADHD you've had to debunk on a regular?
Oh man, there's too many. Everyone's a little bit ADHD. Have you had that one?
I mean, everyone's a little bit autistic as well. I mean,
Yes,
you can't
absolutely.
say that. I mean, I know one of the biggest ones, and you've mentioned it earlier, is, oh,
Yeah,
ADHD is only in childhood. Bullshit.
absolutely. And it's only little boys running around breaking things, right?
No, everyone. I mean,
Mm,
but ADHD people think, oh, ADHD stops when you hit 18. No, it doesn't.
yeah,
It's like autism or any other disability. It grows with you.
yeah,
People just learn as they get older how to manage it better,
yeah.
or they're on medicine.
ADHD and autism and other neurodevelopmental situations and differences are there from birth. It is possible to become neurodivergent later on in life through some kind of trauma or through a physical trauma. But most people are born with whatever neurodivergent type they are from the very beginning. It is highly heritable. So it means if you got a diagnosis, there's a good chance you got it from one of your two parents,
Yep.
or both if you're lucky. Um, and so if you happen to have parents who are going, well, I never did that, and you've got a diagnosis, it's really important to recognize that perhaps they grew up in a time when the things you do were not acceptable.
Mm.
And they would have found ways to cope with that, whether that was healthy or not, doesn't matter. The way they were brought up was a way for them to manage the way they were.
That's so funny you mentioned that. Because my father had ADHD, I'm pretty damn sure of it. He
Mm,
had traumas with spelling and everything.
So
My
dyslexia
father,
probably too.
yeah, my father had passed, and now even before then, I'd look at my mother and watch her habits and things, and
Yes.
I'm thinking to myself, there is 100% chance you're probably autistic
Hmm.
because I see the traits of myself somewhat in you. And I
Yes.
go to her, I'm like, you're probably autistic. She's like, no, I'm not. And I'm like, oh, yes, you are. I see a lot of my traits in you. She's like, well,
Yeah.
what about your father? I'm like, yeah, I know dad's got ADHD. That's probably how I
Mm,
got it. But a
yeah.
lot of the things you do, like you're a little over talkative at times, or you're a little bit
Mm,
over friendly.
yeah.
Those are things I do.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
one of the greatest stories I remember was after I'd finished school, I got my degree in England, and I'm talking with one of my classmates, friends of mine, and then she's like, "Can I ask you a personal question?" And I'm like, "Sure." She's like, "Do you have autism?"
Uh-huh.
Uh, and I was like taken back at the moment, and I'm like, what made you figure that out?" She's like, "Well,
Hmm.
I am doing a program I'm with the psychology department because I'm going for my psychology degree, and I'm working with younger kids who have autism, and
Hmm.
you got a lot of those traits. You're over friendly, you talk a little talkative too much, not
Hmm.
knowing what to say at the right time,
Hmm.
and you have all those traits." And I'm like, I was just blown away.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, neurodivergent people. can spot each other
Mhm.
a lot quicker than anyone else can. But obviously, if you're in the business and you understand what it is that makes people autistic or ADHD, you're going to spot it easier in other people. The concern is if you ask someone that question and they don't know yet, especially if they uh, attach meaning to those traits, if they believe that those traits are not good,
Yeah,
you may be causing a bit of social difficulty.
yeah.
So it's important to treat that very, very carefully and assess what it is you're gaining by asking that question.
I mean, that is so true because I mean, and nowadays you got to be careful what you say to people
Mhm,
because if you say that to somebody who's a friend and they don't know it, it
mhm.
could become accusatory.
Absolutely. Even if you didn't mean it like that, if they see, let's, for example, use autism, if they see autism as a bad thing or
Mhm.
some kind of a deficiency, and you are now suggesting that they might be autistic, then that's going to hurt them.
Yeah.
So it's really important that we recognize that people don't all see the world in the same way. And just because we're 100% certain about the way we see it doesn't mean we're right. And maybe if we're right, it doesn't mean other people don't have the right to be wrong.
So true. I mean, early on, I remember this encounter I had on over Facebook.
Mm,
Back in the day, and I'm pretty sure it's still to this day, people don't like the term disability
mhm.
because it means, especially when it comes to their child, because it means their child
Mhm.
is disabled.
Yeah,
And that term is still a negative term.
sure. Yeah. It's
And
very associated with being defective, right?
yeah. And this woman's like, I want to know why my son is autistic.
Mhm.
And I'm like, well, it's hereditary. And she's like, no, it's not. It's due to his vaccines. I'm like, no,
Yeah.
it's not due to the vaccines.
Yeah. It's
See,
food additive, surely.
yeah, I'm like, the CDC said so. And she's like, I don't believe the CDC. The president says it wasn't. It was caused by vaccines. I'm like, the president at the time was a big idiot. I'm like, and she's like, well, you're insulting an elderly woman. I'm like, no, I'm not insulting. I'm educating an elderly woman who's got a son who's disabled.
Mhm.
I am myself autistic and I know what's right and what's wrong.
Yeah. So here's the way we might approach that. That would be less fueling of difficulties, right? Some people prefer to see it as just a difference. Some people prefer to see it as a difference instead of a disability. We
Mm,
have to be aware that some traits of autism are disabling. They are difficult for people. They make life hard. Some other parts of people's lives, like our social expectations, is what makes
mhm,
it disabling. So, for example, somebody who struggles to make eye contact, who's autistic, if we make them make eye contact, there's a high chance they're not going to be able to focus on the damn thing you're saying. So it's important that we recognize that when we make people behave in a certain way because we think that means they're being respectful or paying attention, that we may actually be crossing that person's boundaries. So it's really important that we start recognizing what it is that an individual needs and phrase it in a way that doesn't make it an argument. Because some people will see this as a disability and want it known as a disability. In law, it is a disability. Some people will want it known as a difference, and some people will want it known, and here's where it gets uncomfortable, as a superpower. Um,
mhm.
I have to tell you, I don't feel particularly superpower like when I have double booked myself, or I'm late for something,
Yeah.
or I've
Mhm.
forgotten a word, or whatever. Um, we have to be aware that human beings are have so many different facets to them that it can't just be one. It can't just be disabling. It can't just be a difference, and it can't just be a superpower. It's all of the above, and we need to be very careful how we address it with other people so we don't upset them. We don't need to go around upsetting people. We can have conversations, we can explore, but there's no need to upset each other.
It's so true. I mean, and nowadays with where everything is politically correct, where you gotta say
Mm,
the right thing, you
mhm.
need to watch what you say to people
Yeah.
because just because somebody doesn't act the way you think they should act with a disability doesn't mean coming up to them and saying, "Hey, you don't act autistic."
Mhm.
It still comes off hurtful.
You know, when you've met one autistic person, you've met one autistic person. There are so many different ways to be autistic that it's really unfair to take one cookie cutter approach and go, well, I've met this one autistic person, so the rest of you should all be like that. And if you're not, it means you're not autistic. You're not a proper autistic. So it really helps to be aware that every human being you've ever met is unique, unusual in their own way. And unless you're going to spend the time to get to know how they are, you're going to do them a disservice at some point.
I mean, that's such a true statement because people are got to realize every autistic person doesn't have, one of us don't share the same common traits.
No.
You're going to reach people who are level ones, or you're going to
Hmm.
talk to people who are level three.
Hmm.
It just
Hmm.
means we have a different needs of support, but each
Yeah,
one of us has our own traits. Just
sure.
like ADHD, there's several levels of it.
Hmm. Here's the difficulty with the functional terms. Um, let's say you're a level one autistic person, right? Which should indicate that you are capable of socializing. You can look after yourself most of the time. Um, but what that doesn't tell the rest of the world is you may be able to do what you need to do in school. You may be able to do what you need to do in a job. You may even be able to maintain a relationship. But what happens when you get home from all the activities you've been in, you are flat on your back on your bed the rest of the day, or maybe a whole weekend to try and recover from that, to be able to go and do those things again, which means rest is never just about rest. Rest is always about gearing up for productivity. And that's not a fair thing to put on someone just
Yeah.
because you say they're level one, they are functioning well. Well, do you call that functioning well? Having to sleep the whole weekend and not have any kind of a comfortable social life or hobbies or anything like that because you just don't have the energy? That's a disabling situation. And that's why these functioning labels are a little contentious in some areas because, so for example, somebody who recognizes themselves as an ADHD or later on in life might say, right, I want to go and get an assessment. And in this country, in the UK, we would need to go to the GP, and the GP would have a look at them and go, all right, so you're telling me you've got a job, you're married, you've got kids, you've never been in prison, and you're not bankrupt. And you're also telling me you're an ADHDer. Well, yes, because someone will be struggling in all the ways that ADHDers struggle and sometimes also be able to do all of those
Mhm.
things. The fact that it doesn't affect them as much in the way that you've decided is reasonable for function doesn't mean that in their life they're not struggling. You don't see the shame that people feel when they've double booked themselves. You don't see the discomfort people feel when they can't stop talking about the thing they love. Um, you can't see it when those people go, oh, it's going to take me 3 times as long as anybody else because I have to factor in all the distraction I have to deal with.
Mhm.
Um, people experience the thing the way they do it. Not everyone's the same. You can't judge them all the same way.
I mean, that reminds me of a great story. Before I was diagnosed with ADHD, I mean,
Hmm.
with autism, I had ADHD.
Mm.
And my parents had me go away to a school up in Wisconsin, which in Oshkosh, which specialized in dealing with disabilities. And I
Uh-huh.
remember sitting down, and you would sit down with one of the former students. And I remember talking with him, and the one thing that sticks in my head was, he's like, I'm gonna tell you something, and you're gonna remember this. He's like, where it takes a normal student 1 hour to do their work, it's gonna take
Yeah,
us 2 to 3 hours. It's
sure.
because it's gonna take you an hour to process it, an
Hmm.
hour to understand it, and then an hour to process it, understand it, and write down and come up with your answer.
Yeah.
Because our minds are wired so differently than everybody else.
Hmm.
Most people think A to B. We think A loop to loop to loop B. Because our
Yeah.
minds are all over the place. It's going
Yeah.
to take us that much longer to get stuff done.
Absolutely. And if you then judge yourself by the parameters of a different person's functioning, you could feel terrible about yourself instead of going, well, they need this in their lives in order to be able to function. I need this in my life to be able to function. And if I try and do it a different way, it's not going to work out. So how about I just lean into what works for me?
I mean, that's what
We
I say.
all have that job. That's our job, is to
Yeah.
learn about ourselves and work out what we need.
That's what I say to a lot of people. I mean, a lot of my friends who are struggling, like, well, he's doing this and this works for them. And I'm like, yeah, but that works for them. What works for
Ah,
them doesn't work for you. You got to find
absolutely.
what works for you to keep
Yeah.
you happy.
Yeah. So when people come to my mindfulness courses for ADHDers, that is what we do because there is an awful lot of belief in mindfulness that there's only one way to do this.
No, there's not.
And there really isn't. So if people believe that coming to a mindfulness course means they're going to have to sit cross-legged and chant, I have news for them. You can if you want to, and I will show you how to do it if you want to do that. But if you want to be standing up and swaying with your out breath to the left and swaying with your in breath to the right, you do that. If you want to be moving your hands open and shut with your out and in breath, do that. If that holds your attention, the whole point of what we're doing in mindfulness is to choose how we hold our attention and what we're doing it on. And I am not there to prescribe to you how to do that for yourself. I can give you some pointers. I can say some people have found this and that to help to be helpful, and we can try it. Why don't
Mhm.
we have a go at it? In the same way as you might go into a clothes shop and go, "Oh, that looks nice on the hanger. I have to try it on to see if I like it." If you don't like it, you put it back again. You don't have to keep a hold of this. It's a sort of playing exploration, right? And that's why my class tends to be a bit different from a standard mindfulness class because we explore a lot more, we make space for it. We have more breaks because I know my attendees will need more breaks in order to be able to focus. And if I don't do that, that's actually me crossing their boundaries.
So you would say that's kind of a way to help with the stillness is you can do it
Mhm,
whatever way you want, long as it
mhm.
works for you.
Absolutely. You need to understand what the purpose is, right? And the purpose is to be able to focus on one thing. In most meditation, people will say that's the breath. Well, guess what? It doesn't even have to be the breath. You can use other focuses. You could use other sensory inputs as a focus, like sound, for example. You can use
Mhm.
looking at something. For example, you might be looking at a candle and that holds your attention rather than focusing on the breathing quite so much. You might find that actually focusing on the breathing and one of those other anchors helps you to be in the moment more than just choosing one. But we've got to work out what works for you. And if you add to that the likelihood of someone being neurodivergent to have also had some kind of traumatic something in their life, we need to be aware of what the trauma-informed approach is,
Mhm.
as well as what the neurodivergent informed approach is, and combine those.
Now, do you feel that with modern meditation, it needs to be changed to help with those of us who have an ADHD brain?
We're back to one of these very personal choices. It helps a lot of people. It helps a lot of people to be able to maintain the kind of life they want, right? And I am never going to say to someone they mustn't do that. Never, not once.
Okay.
But we have to be aware that medication is A, not that useful to some people, B, not accessible to everyone, and C, the choice. You know, some people would prefer just not to use medication to maintain what they're doing. And this is where mindfulness is a really good help because it's sustainable. It doesn't matter what the economy is doing. If you've managed to build a practice, how whatever looks like a practice for you, you can
Mhm.
whip that practice out at every opportunity. Whereas if there's a shortage in medication, you've got a problem. If
Mhm.
for some reason it becomes unaffordable or your health insurance won't pay for it, then you've got a problem. You can meditate at the same time as being on medication. You can meditate without being on medication. But meditation is a whole lot more sustainable um, than relying on something else. So I guess what I'm saying is choose what works for you, but be aware that you can always use meditation as well or instead of.
I mean, that's so interesting about medication because I've talked with many different people who have
Mhm.
ADHD, and a lot of them said, I don't use medication. I have my own ways of helping me manage it.
Yeah. And that's very valid, right?
Hmm.
It doesn't have to be just one way fits all. And everyone has very good reasons for why they choose what they choose, and particularly folks who struggle with blood pressure, for example. And this will be very relevant to women in their perimenopause period, may not be able to take some of these stimulant medications. And so it's not appropriate for them to keep going in that direction. It really helps them to be able to find another alternative.
Now, what internal messages do ADHD clients often carry, and how can we reframe them?
Oh, you're asking some good questions. Hang on, let me have a bit of thinking here. Um, so internal messages ADHDers carry. So we need to have a look at what it looks like to be an ADHDer to answer that one, right? If you imagine you are someone like me who, for a good few decades, had no idea they were an ADHDer, and that's why things were different for them. The messages you might be getting from the outside world is that your way is wrong.
Hmm.
Why can't you just do it in this way, which is right? In inverted commas for those of us who are not seeing me on, on video doing the fingers here. If you believe that your way is wrong, then that will affect your self-esteem, which will then have a very likely outcome of trying to people please, to
Hmm.
be seen to match up to neurotypical norms, to be able to fawn people into being kind to you and not being mean to you. That means that people often abandon their own needs. In fact, it can get people to the point where they never learn how to notice their own needs. It's hard enough for ADHDers. We don't sometimes recognize we're hungry. We don't recognize when we're tired. We don't recognize when we need the loo. If that's the case as a natural part of us, and now we're learning that when we do try and attend to our own needs, that actually that's wrong, it means that we get to an adult stage where we believe that unless we're pleasing other people, we have no value. Unless we're doing it the way other people say is right, we have no value. And that mucks up your self-esteem, something awful, which means if you cannot behave in the way that the rest of the world or your family expects you to, you feel like you're no good. And that's dangerous.
People pleasing is it seems to always be one of the most dangerous things because people
Hmm.
feel like I need to make this person like me. And people
Yeah,
don't realize not everybody wants to like you, and you can't make everyone like yourself because everyone has got different needs and likes. You can't
hmm,
be liked by everybody, so you got to
yeah,
just be happy with who you have
yeah,
instead of who you want.
yes. So as time goes on and people learn mindfulness, there's
Hmm.
more and more elements of compassion comes into it. You're no longer just looking at what's going on and not judging it. You're also bringing yourself what you need in the moment. So when people find themselves not liked, the alternative before mindfulness might be just work harder, do more.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which has the unintended consequence of burning you out. Unless you're pleasing that person, you are not doing a good job in your own eyes. Whereas with mindfulness and compassion, it becomes clear that we start loving ourselves for exactly as we are. First, we spend some time learning how it is, then accepting it, and then loving it. Because if we can love ourselves exactly as we are, we're much more likely to be able to be lenient to other people. We're much more likely to be able to put up with other people's foibles and go, it's different. Doesn't mean it's bad. It's just not the same as mine.
That reminds me of something that happened in my life with a good friend of mine.
Mm,
He, he's autistic with ADHD,
mm,
and his boyfriend had came to me online one day and goes, I can't take it anymore. I'm like, what's going on? And
mm.
he's like, he's imitating everything I do.
Okay.
I don't have a personality of my own anymore. And
Mm,
he's like, I'm afraid to break up with him.
yeah.
I'm like, don't break up with him. Let me talk to him.
Yeah.
I talked to him. I'm like, listen, you can't do everything he does. You
Yeah.
gotta first find what makes you happy
Yeah.
inside. You got to be happy with yourself first
Uh-huh.
before you branch out and then with him. Because
Hmm.
once you're happy with I told him, once you're happy with yourself, then everything falls into place.
Yeah.
And I said,
Absolutely.
and I told him, you can't sit there and wait for him online because you're strangling him. It's like you're not giving him space.
Yeah.
And like give each other 2 months off. And
Yeah.
that worked. And that saved the relationship.
Wonderful. Do you know, it reminds me of a bit I read in one of Gabor Mate's books about people who people please. It says, I think the quote says something like, people who are not secure in their own being because whatever they are is seen as wrong are
Mhm.
likely to imitate their partner. And so if I can't be me, I'll be you.
Ooh.
And that is risky for both parties in the way that you've just described. The person who is secure with themselves suddenly finds their partner completely trying to limp it onto everything that they do. And then that means they no longer have a partner because the partner's ghosting their own life. The partner's stopping being themselves or even trying to explore what is themselves. The healthiest relationship you're ever going to be in is when both get to be themselves and love the other one for it.
Now, how do you blend mindfulness into ADHD therapy?
So, um, it depends on what it is someone comes to me with. If they are experiencing an emotional difficulty that needs therapy, what we'll do is we'll work out whatever is going to be the right approach for that emotional difficulty. Very often it's anxiety. Um, because we've lived in a world where we've had to be hyper vigilant and there's always
Yeah,
something about to
yeah.
happen. It teaches us to be anxious. Now, what's very helpful is mindfulness brings us ways of being here. Anxiety is usually to do with remembering things that have gone wrong in the past and trying to avoid that happening again in the future. So you're constantly either in the past or in the future. Whereas if we're able to teach people to focus on what's genuinely happening factually right now,
Mhm.
that's where the help is. When we are able to get people to understand that, and this is a big one, feelings are not facts. That's when they start recognizing that when I'm feeling rubbish, it's not because I am rubbish. I'm feeling rubbish because perhaps somebody's not respecting me, or perhaps some boundaries being crossed. And actually, I need to give that some attention rather than trying to fix it by doing more. Until people start recognizing their own needs, they're not going to be able to look after themselves. And until people are their own priority, they are not going to be well. Um, so that's how I bring mindfulness into therapy by bringing in this recognition of what's genuinely going on. I do also bring in some of the grounding methods. So, for example, if somebody's come into a session and they're all het up about something, and
Mhm.
you know, what we'll do is we'll settle the body first. Once we've done that with a grounding exercise, we'll address the feelings, the emotions of what's going on before we get to the and now what can we do about it? So mindfulness, I carry it all throughout therapy sessions. Um, it's not so accessible to turn therapy into when we're doing mindfulness classes because we've got a group, and obviously everybody doesn't have exactly the same needs. If I focus it to only ADHDers or ODHDers in the group, it means we're much more likely to have overlapping needs. We're all needing similar things. So I don't end up having to try and support people who have needs that are completely opposite to the rest of the class most of the time. So that makes it a safe space, but we can't make it a therapy space because it can't be so specific for each person. And that's why it's really important if you're going to come to a mindfulness class that you recognize whether this is the right time for you. If you find yourself in crisis, perhaps therapy is more appropriate. If you are already in therapy, it's a good idea to speak to your practitioner to try and work out between the two of you whether going on an 8 week mindfulness course is the right thing for you. And I'm not saying don't do it. I'm just saying let's have a chat. Let's see if it's right.
Now, can mindfulness help with like executive dysfunction, like people who are like time blind
Uh-huh.
or problems with everything else that executive dysfunction has?
Yes, absolutely. So there are studies that actually prove that the prefrontal cortex, which is the bit that holds your executive function, physically grows when you learn to meditate. You
Mm,
grow more gray matter as you learn to meditate. Now, it's obvious that if the bit that holds the executive function grows, you've got more of a capacity to use it, right?
hmm
But it also helps us with memory, and memory is a really useful part when it comes to executive function. We can remember what happened last time, and we can make new plans for next time if we observe the patterns that we learn from looking at ourselves. But if we don't learn to look at ourselves, we don't learn those patterns, and we can't make proper decisions for when we do, when we want to change what's going on for us. So the first step is noticing the patterns, and that comes from practicing regularly, checking in with yourself. Okay, so I'm feeling like this now. Last week at this time, I felt like that. What's different? That's what we learn from mindfulness, and it gives us the opportunity to see the problem and then make some decisions that are going to be helpful.
Now, what are some of the challenges you had to deal with some of your clients?
Well, I um, I'm having a big thing to myself because as a therapist, it is my job to make sure that I give my clients complete confidentiality. What I can tell you is that I don't just see clients, I also work in a lot of online networking spaces where I get to see other ADHDers in their normal life. So when I give you an example, it's not necessarily going to be a client.
Okay.
Um, so problems that often come up. Do you mean in mindfulness or do you mean in like general life?
General life. I mean,
General
with
life.
ADHD, what are some of the biggest things you see with people who have
Mm,
ADHD that come to you?
okay. Emotional regulation shows up for almost everyone that I have ever met with ADHD. And it shows up in that people sometimes feel this term rejection sensitivity dysphoria. Now, that's not a medical term. That's something that the ADHD, um, uh, what's the word I'm looking for? Society um, recognizes. We're more sensitive to rejection than other people. And
Mhm.
the reason for that is we've had more of it. We've been rejected several more times in our lives than other people have. And therefore, it's going to be harder for us when somebody says, no, that's not right. Added to that, that we tend to feel things more deeply than the rest of the population. We feel them to the core. Means that when we feel hurt, oh my word, it feels like the world's ending. And sometimes we make decisions in those times when we're hurting, which feels like the right thing to do in the moment. But remember, I said to you earlier, a feeling is not a fact.
No.
And you may be making some big mistakes if you act in the moment when you're feeling the feelings. So for ADHDers, if we can get a grip of that one, if we can recognize that the feelings are not bad, we have to feel them, and we have
Mhm.
to feel them in the depth that we feel them, but we have to recognize that they are only messengers. They are only signposts. They are not the full story. We need to try and work out the rest. Then it's possible to start making change in our lives that are not so reactionary.
Now, how does mindful self-compassion look like in therapy for ADHD?
Well, the first step is mindfulness is about recognizing what's going on, right? So you need to recognize that I feel things deeply and let that be there. You don't have to like it, but you have to let it be there because it's true, it's a fact.
Hmm.
The next step would be to go, under which circumstances do I usually feel these feelings that hurt me so much? And try and work out what is it, what is the pattern around that that's building the discomfort? Is it because it reminds me of a thing that happened several times in my childhood? Is it because right now somebody's crossing a boundary for me? Or is it because it's going to make it harder for me in the future? Once we've worked that one out, we can start building a picture of what's going on. The self-compassion part comes once we've accepted what's going on and we try and give ourselves what we need in the moment. So that's where it becomes really important to start recognizing what our needs are so that we know what to give ourselves. And here's a practice that I use both in mindfulness classes as well as in therapy. It's called the self-compassion break. And I want to say that it is Kristen Neff. That's right, Kristen Neff's practice. It's a three-stage practice. And if you're okay for me to run through it just now, I'll do that.
Yeah,
Is that
go
all right?
ahead. That's fine.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So it's three stages. The first stage is recognizing that you are having a moment of suffering. So the original text says, this is a moment of suffering. For me, I might like to change it up a bit. I might go, this is rubbish. This is a skip fire. I hate what's going on right now. Recognizing that the moment's difficult is the first step. The second stage of it is to recognize that suffering is universal. Everyone has difficulty in their lives. You don't get to sidestep that. Um, and not only that, it's not because of something they've done that makes it difficult. Life is difficult no matter who you are. You can speak to the one percenters and they will have difficulties too. Um, so it's important to recognize that suffering isn't necessarily because we've done something wrong. Suffering just happens.
Mhm.
Um, and then the third stage of that is to bring in some recognition of what our needs are and how we can bring kindness to that. There's different ways of doing that. You could put hands on yourself so that you can feel the warmth of your hands and find some comfort from that, comforting self-touch. Or you could use a kind tone to your inner conversations. You might go, "Oh, darling, that's rough. You're really having a tough time." And actually, it's not even because you've done anything wrong. It just is because people have a tough time. What is it you need right now in the way that you might do for someone that you love, someone you care for? Or it might be an action. For example, if I recognize that I've been binge watching Netflix for the last 12 hours, recognize that it's no longer actually kindness. Now it's becoming avoidance. And actually, the kind thing for me to do would be to switch the telly off and go to bed. It's important to start working out what it is we need. What is the kind thing to do for ourselves? It's not always the easy thing, but sometimes um, it is easy to just go, well, I just give myself what I need right now. Sometimes it's a cup of tea. Sometimes it's a biscuit.
Now, how do you define success for ADHD clients, and how can listeners define their own?
Well, when people have come as a therapy client, because I use cognitive behavioral therapy adapted to each different person I work with, not a manualized version like you might get if you were going into the NHS, for example. Um, we set some goals when we start off. We go, what's difficult for you? What do you need to change? Why is that useful to you? And so it means as we go along, by the end of therapy, we'll know we've got to the end of therapy because we'll have made the change they were looking for. My input into that goal setting is to make sure that it's a smart goal, it's specific, it's measurable, it's achievable, it's realistic and it's time bound. So we'll know once we've got to it. When people are making change for themselves, that really helps as well. If they're very specific about what it is they want from it, then it's more possible to see whether they've achieved what they're looking for. And it's also really important to recognize that any goal you set for yourself needs to be your goal,
Hmm.
not what you think your sister's done or what you reckon so and so across the road's doing, or your dad did this at school or at work, and therefore you should measure up. That is nothing to do with you. Your life is your life. Your rules and your goals must be yours.
People don't realize that when you set a goal, it can't be someone else's goals that work for
Hmm.
them, because people
Hmm.
need to realize what worked for them doesn't work for you. It's
Absolutely.
got to be goals that are achievable for yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
I remember my life coach telling me
Uh,
that he's like, write three things down on the piece of paper that you need to get done. And if you don't get them done, you don't get
mm,
them done. You just move them to the next day, and you try to work out one at a time. You don't try to do all
mm.
three. You work one at a time.
Yeah. You know that whole story about you just got to eat the frog?
Not really.
No, okay. So, so I'm not sure, I can't remember where it comes from, but there's this idea that if you've got a list of things to do, you do the difficult one first because then it's out the way and you can keep going. Well, I do not ascribe to that one for ADHDers because we will procrastinate the life out of ourselves and never get to that.
Yep.
My suggestion is instead of eating the frog, and this is going to be disgusting, so hold on to your lunch, um, is you lick the frog. You just have a little go. You do what is the most achievable thing, a small step of the hard thing, because once we've got ourselves into the motion of doing it, once we've been able to do just a little part of it, it's very hard to stop because we've had a little dose of dopamine because we've done something and we can celebrate that. And then we can go to the next stage and have another little dose of dopamine and celebrate that and so on. But unless we actually make a start, a tiny, tiny little first step, that big job, that big task is going to be too hard to do.
Now, what grounding techniques for listeners feeling overwhelmed right now?
Okay, so excuse me just a second. The there's a couple of ways you can do this, and this one is actually this one I'll teach you is probably the most simple. In grounding, what we're trying to achieve is to give the body evidence that we're safe, the body and the mind, right? And in order to do that, we involve the body in whatever it is we're doing. Now, you can use a technique like the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 technique, where you're using specific senses to recognize what's going on around you. But even, if you're in a very heightened state, even that might be hard to achieve. So here's one that I really love doing. If you are finding yourself in a tough spot and all you need to do is find some evidence that things are okay, I would recommend, and I'm going to show you, that you put your forefinger on the opposite hand, just at the knuckle below the thumb, and you breathe in and move the forefinger to the top of that finger there. And as you breathe down, go down the other side. Slow down in the wee dip there. And before you breathe in again, well, when you breathe in again, follow the finger up to the next tip of the finger and breathe out as you go down. And if you do that slowly, what you're doing is you're focusing on your breathing. You're taking your mind away from all the other things that's been worrying it. You're bringing in the sensation of touch. You're incorporating the sense of sight. And if you're listening to your own breathing, you're doing that as well. You're bringing in the sound. And by the time you got to the end of that, you can see how grounded you're feeling. And if you're feeling that perhaps you're just not as grounded as you'd like to be, that's the Apple putting my hand up because of my hand being up on the screen. You can go back the other way. So most people have always got a hand to hand. Most people can breathe. Most people can recognize what's in and what's out when it comes to breathing. So it's accessible and you could do it anywhere. And you don't have to have your hand up like I did because I was doing it so you could see it in the camera, but you could maybe have your hand in your lap and do that. You can do that on the bus. You can do that on the subway. You don't have to make a big song and dance about doing that. Other people don't have to be involved in you doing that. You can, but what I'm saying is it's accessible and you don't have to ask permission to be running your finger around your hand.
And finally, where can people find out more about you online?
Thank you for asking that. So my website is all the W's, rewiretherapy.co.uk. I'm also on LinkedIn and Facebook and Instagram. And if you wanted to send me a message, you can contact me on connect, CONNECT, at rewiretherapy.co.uk, and I will get back to you as soon as I can.
And that's it, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Reed Miles. That was Liezl, and I'll see you in the next one. Thank you, Liezl.
Thank you very much.